And good morning, Hoosier Nation, and welcome to the first edition of the season of Hoosier Morning After, the 89th edition overall of Hoosier Morning After. I'm your host, Chad Schwartzkopf, here with Martha. We're going to break down Indiana's win yesterday against Marion, 78-42, an exhibition game, a game where, as they like to say, the final score doesn't matter, but the injuries do. Or the final score doesn't count, but the injuries do. Overall, a pretty healthy game for everyone that was involved in the game. Obviously, the storyline going into it was that IU was going to be out with without their All-American Trace Jackson Davis and a possible standout and breakout guard, Tamar Bates. Obviously, not what you want to hear or see. Trace was sitting on the side, both of them looking very dapper in their suits, looking like coaches themselves, sitting over there. Trace with the hand wrapped up, still his offhand, so that's at least good, but we don't have details on exactly what's going on with him and the timetable for him, but at least we know when the season gets going and when it matters, he will probably be ready for us to go. Tamar as well, sitting on the sideline, no boot, no major wraps, no report there exactly what's going on that IU is putting out to the public, so just wish them health, and this is the time to sit out and just be a part of it, but hey, so exciting to have IU basketball to watch again, talk about, and get into. And there were many things that we can talk about today that we can take away from this game. Things that we don't want to take too seriously, again, because it is an exhibition game. And while guys are out there competing, they are competing against, no offense to Marion at all, but obviously a lesser opponent. So take the stats and the sample size with a grain of salt, if you will. But lots of good things can come out of this game and everything. So I was very happy with a lot of the play, a lot of the things we saw in yesterday's game. Here with me, I'm going to kick it over to, Martha, to get kind of opening thoughts. Martha, thanks for being on. And if it wasn't announced on this, it was announced on YouTube, but those that or Twitter, but those that don't kind of subscribe to Twitter, but listen to this podcast and everything, be it on YouTube or the different platforms. Thank you as always for doing that. But was just announced this past week that Martha's going to join me more on a regular basis as a co-host and everything. So it's going to be great to have Martha on and joining with me. Always great to have another voice and not just me rambling away. Martha, what did you see in yesterday's game from the Hoosiers?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for the invitation to co-host this here with you. I'm thrilled. You and I have talked a lot. You've really instilled in me, by being a part of this show, that sometimes instant reaction isn't always the best, and sleep on it, which has been a challenge for me over the years, especially with IU basketball. So I'm incredibly excited to be joining you. When you look at yesterday's scrimmage, I think the obvious storylines, right? And, we kind of got wind that maybe Trace, maybe there'd be a couple guys that were sitting out, and with Trace and Tamar, and we saw that announced before the game, and it's like, okay, this is going to give a chance for you start thinking about the storylines. It's going to give a chance for some of the young guys that we've heard so much about, and we've seen them in bits and pieces, and whether it's Hoosier hysteria or whatever it is, but this is going to give us a chance. One was slated as a starter. One was slated as somebody that's going to come off the bench early and replace Trace. So you knew you were going to get a chance to see those guys, maybe even a little bit more than we were originally going to. And what a joy it was to watch both of them. I think really, Malik Renew, and seeing the game he put forth, I think, what was it, 12, 13 points at the half, something like that. That might be a little bit high, but just seeing the way he came out, and, both of them just look like they belong, right? Both of them look Big Ten ready. Obviously, you mentioned it, right? Overreacting after a first scrimmage. And these things always have a way of being a little bit sloppy. And sometimes, with way lineups are managed, they end up being a little bit closer than sometimes we like. But this one, there obviously there was never really any doubt. And sure, there was some sloppiness at times. But, my biggest takeaway was really how the freshmen looked. Those guys look like they are going to be instant contributors. Both look like they could start for a Big Ten team today. So that was my encouraging thing. I thought, Hood Schifino looked smooth, had some nice turnaround jumpers, had great moxie out on the floor, and just again, they both look like they belong. And that's incredibly encouraging when you think about the nucleus that's back from last year, and then being able to add these two guys amongst others. So I'm thrilled.
Yes, and that's definitely the biggest storyline for me going in. Let's kind of maybe dive a little bit deeper into Malik. I was shocked. One thing that shocked me about him first was his size. I think I was expecting someone in my head. I was expecting someone kind of Race's size or slightly shorter, but he looked taller than Race. He wasn't obviously as stocky and wide as Race. He was still very built. So that's kind of one of the first things that took me back when I just saw them walking around and standing. I don't know why, but I had him smaller in my head. And then it was his footwork. His footwork is, just a thing of beauty. It is amazing what he can do with the ball. And his spin moves and everything. It was something that we've talked about, and we talked about in our Twitter Spaces, and then we've seen in all scouting reports about him and videos of him in high school was this great footwork and the movement he has off the ball. And it was great to see it in action and see how well he was able to implement that now at this level. Now, again, it's against lesser opponents. We'll see how he handles that and how other opponents that are more seasoned big men can be against him. Now, that's not saying that he didn't play a seasoned guy. Let me see if I can find his name real quick. But the gentleman on Marion's team, as they said, was a touted top 100 recruit, played for some different programs. So he did have a little bit of competition of someone to go against there for a little bit in the game. Finished with the double-double, 14 points, 11 rebounds, and even went out of the game at the 16-minute mark in the second half, 14-minute mark. I can't really trust the stats. If you kind of followed along last night, the stats kind of went all over the place. Some of the stat reporting's a little off on this game, but again, that's fine. Again, we don't want to take these stats too serious, but he was a little banged out when he went out, but looked like just kind of a thigh bruise type of thing. Looked like he caught a knee to the thigh or hamstring or something like that, but should be good go the next game and everything. You talked a little bit about Malik. What other things surprised you or made you happy about Malik's game?
Well, you mentioned it, man. He looks like, to me, he looks like he'd make one heck of a tight end or defensive end on the football field. The guy is just, for a freshman, the guy is just built, and I think it was earlier in the week when we were doing the Twitter Spaces, I think it was Chris Williams, IU Artifacts, that mentioned, just the size of his legs and their tree trunks. But, that's just it, his size. But then, to your point, his ability to manage his footwork with that size. You see guys that come in young, that big, and sometimes it takes them a little bit of time to kind of, grow into their body and get D1 ready. But, and again, we're talking about facing an NAIA team, but, still, you could see the skill set there with what he brings to the table and finishing with 14 points, and I think going something like 8 for 11 from the floor. That's one heck of a debut, and it kind of overshadows somebody. I think where the double kind of overshadows somebody else. I'm sure we're going to talk about too is Logan Duncombe being able to come in and do the same thing. It's like, man, got two guys that one being brand new and then one not getting a whole lot of time last year, coming in and making an instant impact like that while still having your returners from last year. I think that it's a really solid start. Really, really, really good thing to see. But yeah, Malik's going to be just a heck of a contributor for us.
Yes, and then in a way, it also made me a little nervous because if he keeps going like this and does as well as he is, I don't mean to forecast too soon or put the horse before the car or the cart before the horse, but we may lose him sooner than we expect to as well. But I hope we have him for a couple of years, because obviously next year, as we talked about on Friday, we lose some really good big men. And the question that we kind of brought up was, well, what are the guys next year going to be like the big men? And we got a lot of answers to that in this game. And it was really the story of the big men. That's kind of the most you take away, the most positives you take away from this is what all the big men did for us. Talking and continuing with that, talking about big guys that are going to be here the following year. Logan Duncombe came in, and we've heard a lot of things in the postseason or the offseason about him doing well. Trace Jackson Davis was touting for him. And again, with the depth and the skill, guys are just going to get better because they keep going at each other at practice and everything. But great to see Logan get out there and post a double-double himself. And what really impressed me with him was his rebounding skills. And he is that motor and that rebounding vacuum cleaner that he was touted to be in high school. So it was great to see that, and the mullet looking gorgeous out there flowing around. Always great to have a goofy white guy with a mullet that's just going to outwork everyone and frustrate everyone down below. And I also watched a few possessions where he was getting really physical and battling when he didn't have the ball on defense and offense. Getting a little handsy with the guys, getting into position and everything down below. So that's great to see. Obviously, he's learning he has to be like that in the Big Ten and knows what it takes. Martha, what did you see, and what do you take away from Logan's game?
Yeah, I think again it was kind of the big. I mean, he was kind of even more of a question mark than I think the freshman. I think we knew the skill set the freshman brought, and you know, by all reports, we knew that they were going to see the court quite a bit. But with Logan, you've got a guy who's been here for a year, and you know, a guy that didn't see the court a ton last year. And I think by some accounts there, you know, were questions whether, you know, he may look to the transfer portal during the offseason last year and things like that. So it was, for me, it was one of those questions where is he really going to be a contributor for us this season? We've heard some of the players say, yeah, he's made some strides, but you know, I go back to yesterday and, you know, leaving with the sense that, okay, he looks like he belongs. And anytime you can go out and get a double-double, and regardless of the opponent, we're talking about college basketball at the end of the day, you know, I think that's a statement, right? And again, just what a blessing to have. I mean, we think about last year and the drop-off from, and this is no discredit to anybody that was on last year's team, but you think about, you know, going from, you know, getting Trace and Race in trouble and having a drop off to Michael Durr. And again, no discredit to him, and then you think about the position we're in this year, and you know, the Big Ten is a grind, and who knows what's going to happen with injuries, and to be able to have two guys that from a skill set and preparation standpoint look like they're both ready to come in and contribute, and you know, but by the first game, it looks like Logan really benefited from having a year behind him, being able to go up against Race and Trace every day. And he's not going to come in and shy away from contact or you know, going at it with folks down low. So really encouraged to see what he brought to the table. Encouraged to see, you know, I think the biggest thing is like, okay, was any of this an outlier? Let's see how they play again against St. Francis this week. You know, are we overreacting? So, but again, I mean, what we saw from the two performances really echoes what we heard kind of leading up to the game from some of the players, some of the staff, and some of the names that we heard mentioned that we weren't necessarily sure we're going to be ready to contribute early on. So, yeah, another exciting performance from Logan.
Yep. And then rounding out our big men, Race Thompson. Really funny to see the Race Curry Thompson tweets start to pop up. Obviously something that we're very excited and was something that we wanted to see expanded in his game was his 3-point shooting. And Race comes out and makes the first 3-pointer for IU, finishes 3 for 4 and was perfect 3 for 3 in the first half. Darn had to shoot that one in the second half and ruin his perfect shooting outing of the game, but finishes with 13 points, 4 for 6 from the field, 6 rebounds, just 4 shy to make a double-double himself, but goes out pretty early and kind of rests for the rest of the game as well. I can't say exact minutes because the minutes are very off on the stat thing that I am looking at, but some very promising things to see from Race. Martha, what did you see from Race?
Yeah, I always I asked myself, and while I love Race knocking down threes, and Woody, of course, talked about it, after the game, and by all indications made it sound like he was going to allow Race to continue to have that, that freedom to shoot threes. And it's just one of those things where you think about a big guy and shooting threes. It's like, you kind of cringe when the ball is leaving the hands, but then it goes in and you're like, yes. I'm reminded of Justin Smith was kind of the same way. And, I remember specifically a game against Michigan State where, early in Archie's tenure, where Justin Smith knocked down, I think, two or three threes in the second half to really, really lead IU to victory. But it's also at the same time, you're like, do we really want you shooting threes? And I always have kind of the same thought process for Race too. But, when you go 3 for 3 and are shooting 1,000% from range, by all means, continue to shoot. But it's fun to see. I think with Race, we know what we're going to get at this point, right? I think that he's our glue guy. He's gonna be our leader down low, and I love seeing his range. I think if he has any desire to play at the next level, it's something he's going to have to be able to showcase a little bit. So to go out and see him have some success doing so, I'm all about it. And if he continues to get open looks and continues to knock them down, then let's roll with it. But again, with Race, I think we, no real surprises outside of the shooting from distance, and outside of that, we kind of knew what we were going to get, and it was good to see him have a pretty solid game.
Yes, and the more threes, or the more at least slight bit of threat he can be from three, the better the spacing gets underneath, the better and the more working room that Trace Jackson Davis is going to have going into the season. And there's great moments as well. If Race can hit those and his man can draw out a little bit farther, Trace gets the ball underneath. If Race's guy goes to double, Race is really good at finding the backdoor cut, and those two are great at connecting. There's so many things that opens up for the team and for those guys. As far as the guards go, there's not as much, I feel, to take away from the guards. Jalen Hood-Schifino, he looked a little shaky to begin with, had a little bit of freshman woes to knock off, had a turnover that did not look the greatest at the beginning, but throughout the rest of the game looked very solid, showed off why he is probably going to be only here for 1 year. There was one moment where the shot clock was getting down, and he got to the rim on his own and made it through contact. Probably could have even been called for a foul, but still makes it through contact, which is great to see, because the guards that are driving to the hole in the Big Ten are going to have to finish through contact quite a bit. And we're good at doing that and getting to the rim. And that's something that X supplied us with a lot last year. So it's great to see Jalen Hood-Schifino able to do that as well. Shoots a lot of mid-range, and showed had that beautiful step back fade, and didn't shoot as many threes. Got 2 up, but didn't make any of them. But I think that mid-range game and that driving game is more of what we will kind of see from him, and more in his wheelhouse, with, I think, a few less threes that he'll take throughout the year. What did you see from Jalen?
Yeah, I think, outside of the turnover you mentioned, I think a guy that, to go out and, shoot 5 for 8. I think that, if you're going to, be, and I don't even think concern is the right word. I think if there would have been some icing on the cake, it would have been, Jalen knocking down a couple threes. And because I think that's, when we look at question marks, it's like, okay, here's a guy who's, got incredible guard size, is going to have no trouble getting to the hole, creating his own shot. But when you think about opportunity areas for the Hoosiers and some struggle points from last year, it's like, okay, what can he give us, as a shooting guard from 3-point land? And if there's any positives he can give us there, it's going to be, an advantage over last year. And only took two 3-pointers, missed them both. But, so it's not something that there's any level of concern necessarily, but for me, it would have been the icing on the cake. But, go out and, score 11 points in your first performance on 5 of 8 shooting. Again, that one turnover, he may have had one more throughout the course of the game, but outside of that, I was incredibly impressed by him, and really, as advertised, I would say, right, just a guy that, it's just, he's ready to play at the highest level. And, I know some might think it's a stretch to say that, they're playing Marion, right? But still, I mean, what we've known about him, and then getting to see him against, competition that's not Indiana, it's like, okay, this kid is going to contribute often for IU. Let's enjoy him while we can, right?
Mm-hmm. And with that, Hood-Schifino and Malik a few times hooking up, using that chemistry that they have and everything. Some great kind of moments there, here and there for those two out on the court together, and something that I think we'll see between Jalen Hood-Schifino and Trace Jackson Davis once Trace gets in there, because Trace just knows where he needs to be, same as Malik and everything. And so Jalen's just great at finding those things. So I'm very excited to be able to see him in there with him once they get going. Xavier Johnson kind of had a tough go at it. He was really kind of in his head. I feel like during this game, there was a moment kind of about the 7-minute mark. He was very frustrated at I think a foul or a turnover or something that happened. Watched him, thank goodness for the BTN coverage in this sense, that it's the only time you'll hear me say that, for BTN plus coverage. But since they stay on that wide shot and you see everything going on, the huddles and everything, I enjoyed that very much, and would pay money actually to have that all year. But you saw Woody grab X aside and talk to him outside of the huddle before bringing him together, calming him down, talking to him, saying what he needed to say to him to snap him out of the funk that he had going on. And he kind of got out of it from there. Didn't have a big scoring run, only finished with 4 points, 2 for 11 from the field, and took 3 threes, didn't make any of them. But he struggled a little bit. Few of the other guards were just kind of here and there, nothing really major to take away from them, I would say. Except for maybe CJ Gunn, some interesting minutes there. I think he needs to just improve on his defense. Martha, let me kick it to you. Just any other guards, X you want to talk about, Gunn, Trey, any other guard play or things that stood out to you?
Yeah, I had, I had a couple friends attend the game yesterday, and had a conversation with one who's an overreactor, much like myself, or much like most of, the common IU fan, and spoke to him after the game, and his, he's like, man, I had voiced some concern about X, and I had to, I'm usually not necessarily the voice of reason, but in this case, I kind of had to be, and mention, I'm like, one, we're talking about a scrimmage. 2, X. It took a little while for X to get rolling last year too, and he's never a guy that's not going to come off as emotional or emotionally invested, right? So, don't read.
And we don't want him to lose that. That's a big plus of him.
Exactly. And there's pros and cons with that, right? When things are good, you're going to get, you're X is a guy you're always going to know where he's at emotionally, right? He wears it on his sleeve. If he's struggling, you're going to see some frustration come out in him. And hopefully, what you want, and what I think he's been able to do really successful, is channel that frustration. He's not letting that frustration go beyond him in that moment. It's not resulting in technicals. It's not resulting in, necessarily, unnecessary fouls per se. So, he's always able to challenge it and kind of work through it. And obviously you talked about that moment with Woody yesterday, and sometimes, coaches need to help him reel it in, but yeah, he struggled. 2 for 11 from the field and ended with 4 points, and didn't hit a 3. And that's not necessarily the X we thought we would get, not necessarily the X that finished the season last year, but it's the X that started the season last year. And, I take it with a grain of salt, because by all accounts, he can come out this week and have a tremendous game against St. Francis. It's just X, right? And you play exhibition games for a reason, right? It's to work out some of this stuff. It's to get through some of these kinks. It's he's seeing the first live action other than IU that we've seen in a while. So I don't have really any reason to be concerned. I think there's going to be someone's going to have a game like this. It happens. So work through it, bounce back. He's a guy that we're going to rely on heavily this season. So, and knowing Woody and by all accounts knowing X, they're going to shake it off and it's on to the next. So, certainly you would have loved to see him come out and score double figures and look like the X of late last season. But it is what it is, and fully expect him to kind of bounce back against St. Francis.
Well, and that's the beauty of the depth and the team that we have, the roster we have this year, is that guys can have those funk, guys can have those days, guys can have those games. And again, it like you said, it is truly Woody's philosophy: next man up. Your numbers called, and the next person can step up and help, and doesn't become, other than a slight aside talking point for us podcasters. In the grand scheme of things and in the box score, as long as the win happens and someone else steps up, it doesn't matter.
100%. And especially at the, you make a fantastic point, being able to absorb somebody struggling a little bit better than last, especially at the guard position. You think about our guard lineup last year, and when somebody struggles like that, it was so much more magnified. You didn't have the ability to have a Hood Schifino to rely on, or a couple guys that are you had Trey that was banged up a lot of last year. So you were really relying on guys that weren't able to go in and produce, where now you've added some skilled big men where you've got guys you can rely on down low. You've got added guard depth, and it makes somebody struggling that much more manageable, that much more absorbable, and really that much less evident. It's not going to stick out like a sore thumb where, I remember games last season when X had a performance like he had yesterday, where Twitter would have been on fire. And again, you take who we're playing into consideration, but still, what we saw from Hood Schifino and what we saw, from Malik were the headlines rather than Xavier Johnson struggling, which I don't know that we would have had that luxury last season.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's a great point. Now, the great thing with these exhibition games is that IU can play with different lineups, and you can see different combinations. And we saw some interesting ones in there and everything. And for the first time, I saw IU playing a true 4-out, 1-in offense at one point, when we had a lineup that consisted of Jalen Hood Schifino, Miller Kopp, Trey Galloway, Jordan Geronimo, and Malik. I think that's something when Jordan's in there, we're going to see a lot more. And maybe even with Race, with him shooting those threes, while he didn't line up as much in there, but we saw that 4-out, 1-in kind of getting worked through. Also with some interesting lineups, with putting, obviously, we talked about before, Jalen Hood Schifino and X together. That just seems to be such a great combo. And a lot of times it did seem to default to X bringing the ball down, but it didn't shy away from the fact of Jalen Hood Schifino bringing it up a couple times as well. Were there any combos you saw that you liked? Any different things that expanded past players playing in different positions for you?
Yeah, I was really intrigued by that lineup you just mentioned with Race and Jordan, Geronimo and Miller, as kind of, stretching the floor a little bit in that 4-out, 1-in. And you really get the sense, and to me, this goes back to looking at a lot of the guys that IU focused on recruiting during the offseason, and really and then you combine that with thinking about what a Woody offense looks down the road, right? And he's for his first 2 seasons, he's got big guys that are experienced and skilled, and that's an amazing problem to have. I don't even call it a problem. It's an amazing luxury to have, but also when you start to think forward about what this offense could look like, or what an ideal Woody offense would look like, you start thinking about that 4-out, 1-in, and I think this particular lineup doesn't complement an offense like that as well as I think we'd like, right? I think you could use one more stretch big man that really could shoot a little bit outside. And I think that's kind of where this offense is headed. So I'm always very, very intrigued to your question and to what you were talking about what this offense looks like when we play 4-out, 1-in, and if Miller's hitting shots and if Jordan can get the ball on the floor and, extend the floor a little bit, what it does is creates lineup problems for competition all over the place, right? Can they guard a lineup like that? And if we're able to stretch the floor with talented big guys, can the opponent's big guys, handle that or guard that? So I'm always intrigued. I thought it looked okay. It's probably something that's going to have to continue to evolve a little bit, just because, when you look at our top lineups, it's, you don't really have that luxury of playing 4 out, 1 in. So I thought it looked good. I thought it looked okay, I guess. Maybe not good, but, something that I'm intrigued to continue to kind of watch as we move forward.
One thing on the offense that did concern me a slight bit was I wanted to at least see a play or two where IU ran to get an open look for 3 for a guy. Most of the offense seemed to be a few plays and screens, the 2 guards going down to the baseline and do cross screens for each other and then come back out. A little bit of weaving up top that we know, some screens. And I didn't really see much of that. A few of the 3-point shots that IU did have felt like they were more within the flow of the offense, and something that Woody has touted that he is going to let these guys just play and everything. So that may be part of what we do moving forward. Is you might see a play or 2 ran, and if that opens up something, then great, IU will take that. But if not, then they'll just kind of keep moving, keep setting basic screens for each other, and look for the openings themselves just from playing. Anything offensively, play-wise, as a whole that you saw, or anything that concerned you on that end?
Well, I that's one thing that I take the opponent into consideration, and maybe at the same time thinking about our schedule here moving forward. And it's if you've got set plays like that, maybe it's not showing your hand all at once, right? It's kind of the old football adage where you look at games early in the season and the offense is very vanilla. It's like, well, we're not going to show our whole playbook right yet, right? We don't want to do that if we don't have to. And anytime you're out to a double-digit lead within the first couple minutes, it's okay. Do we really need to be running all our set 3-point plays? And there's obvious pros and cons to that. It's an area where we struggled last season, so let's get us some real looks and see if we can knock them down. The other side of it is, why show our hand if we don't have to? So I don't read a ton of concern into it. I was, you mentioned CJ Gunn, to see him come out and knock down a couple threes. He was kind of a wild card for me in terms of not sure really what, is he college basketball ready? Is he a guy that's going to be able to contribute? And I don't know that we have that question answered quite yet, but to be able to go out and, score 6 points and knock down a couple threes in your first college performance, I think bodes well for what you might be able to contribute. But yeah, I you would have loved to see some more set plays for open 3-point looks, but I kind of also understand why we didn't. And hopefully as we move forward, we see it a little bit more as the competition increases a little bit, because before you know it, we're going to be traveling down to Xavier, and it's going to be our first live experience, and you're going to want to go in with a little bit better feeling that hey, we've got a little bit more in our repertoire this year from distance. So but at the end of the day, 8 for 19, 42% from 3, I'll take it. But would love to see some more set plays for open looks from 3-point lane.
And it's obviously an exhibition game, so we're not going to really ever have anything to complain. We don't want to complain about the refs or anything like that. But one thing I did learn in this game is, and it was something that was kind of focused on last year by referees, that we're going to see and we're going to have to get used to, and going to be a little aggravating. They are really honing in on moving screens. Again, some of them that Indiana committed were pretty obvious, and were Malik or some young guys that need to get used to how that is being called and need to be set. And again, that the moving screen is equally on the big guy, but equally on the guard that they're setting that screen for. They got to put them in the position where they're going to that screen at the appropriate time, not getting their big man in trouble. On the defensive side, though, I do want to talk about, it's very interesting, IU was switching on everything. Every single screen, every chance there was, IU was looking to switch everything on D. And a lot of that speaks to Indiana's size overall. There's not too many crazy mismatches you're going to get beyond X switching with whoever Trace or Race are on if they're on a big guy. That's about the only kind of mismatch you get. Now, you might run into issues where you might have guys that are going to be a little bit quicker to get around some guys, but we've got great help defense that we do. A little bit too much help defense in some regards and in some plays, but interesting to see them switching on everything. What did you think of the D and that switching? And is that going to stick when we get to tougher competition? Is it going to be a game time situation? What do you think we're going to see out of that?
I noticed that as well too, and it was like, man, it almost had this appearance that guys were flying all over the place, and I don't know that it's sustainable as competition increases. It might have been just part of the game plan, as a way. You're always, when you think about scrimmages, you're always kind of, testing some things out, or doing and running certain things to see, how you can execute them and where you need to work on a little bit. So that may have been kind of the theory there. I don't know that it's something that, it's obviously it's always good to get different looks like that. But I left with a feeling that when I think about the defense, it's like, it looked different in some of those aspects where all that switching was happening. So, I left kind of saying, I wonder how it's going to look against St. Francis or the early season games. I don't necessarily think we're going to see that much switching. And maybe it was just something that we were trying to run and get used to a little bit, so we're prepared for the Big Ten season. So certainly looked a little bit unique from what we've seen in the past. And I think the real answer to the question is going to be how they look and what they look like on D against St. Francis.
Yeah. And it can lead itself to being exploited, I think, in the future with IU. Guys have to continue to talk. I think that's the main point. If we're going to switch everything, and all accounts of people that were there, the talking was really good on defense. Woody even said that, I believe, in his post game when he was asked about the defense. He was very happy with how the guys talked and everything. And you need to have that if you're going to switch everything. And again, some guys, when they were switched on a small guy, they got past Jordan a couple times, things like that. And that kind of led to some of Jordan's frustration and his tic-tacky fouls that he had, that we obviously want to see clean up as we go along. Stat-wise, looking at a few stats, we kind of brushed over a few, though. 7 turnovers, 11 total, 7 in the first half and only 4 in the second half. So kind of settled down to that. Again, that's something you're going to see at the beginning of the year. We're used to a double-digit number in those turnovers. We didn't get to the line as much as we normally do. That was a slight bit of concern for me, especially when you're going against a lesser opponent. You figured we'd get downhill a little bit more on them and get a few more chances. But we did end up 6 for 9 from a free throw, which is 67%, which isn't too bad. Any other stats or anything you want to speak about?
Yeah, I think you make a great point with the free throws. I think beyond that, and you also make a great point about the turnovers too. You're gonna see some in early in the season, but it didn't stick out to me like a sore thumb where there's some turnovers and you're like, yes, of course. But I think beyond that, you're starting to pick a little bit, right? I mean, you're really starting to break things down. And so, I think that nobody had any more than two turnovers, right? Both guards had 2 turnovers. So it's not like somebody went out there and had a real problem turning the basketball over, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, when we had a couple guys, I think that had 4 personal fouls and and really weren't on the court a lot. So, you look at, and I think it was Jordan and Trey both had 4 fouls. And you think about those are 2 guys that didn't start. It's like, and then you think about the competition. It's like, okay, well, we don't, obviously we've got fouls to give, but we don't want guys fouling out. So that would be maybe the only other thing I'd look at. But to have 2 young guys, I almost consider Logan a freshman. To have 2 guys in the game with a double in the first game of the year, that to me sticks out a lot more than anything negative I see in the box score. So leave really, really encouraged by that.
Yeah. Great play overall by those guys, and very exciting to obviously see Indiana back on the court again. So much fun to have them, and like you're GIF or meme that you tweeted out during the game of the guy sitting there taking notes, looking up and down and everything. All of us over analyzing a exhibition game, and here we are speaking for 40 minutes plus about an exhibition game. But hey, this is why we're Indiana fans. We're Hoosier fans. This is right. What we do. Exactly. So very exciting to see them go out there. Just going to wrap up kind of your thoughts overall on this game and what you took away, and then maybe what you want to see going into Thursday's game.
Well, it's real now, right? I mean, there's been so much we've spent, the last week, the last weeks, the last month, with all this buildup, right, and all this conversation and excitement and hope, right? I mean, when's the last time that obviously the excitement with Woody's first year last year, but when's the last time that we've come into the season with the amount of hope and excitement that we have, right? Expectations are up there once again, and it's been a while, and Indiana's back in the conversation. So to be able to get the season kicked off and started and have it start with so much positive from our new additions, I think is really what sticks out to me. It's a game where it was never in doubt. We ended up winning it by close to 40 points, and you've got two guys, by all accounts, your sixth man and your best player that don't even play, right? And it gives the stage to some of the younger new guys, and being able to get those guys experience, and not only experience, but have them end the game with really putting a lot of positive production on the court, I think is exciting. My hope is, you ask what's one thing I'd like to see moving forward. I'm hoping to see a full healthy roster this week when we play St. Francis, so we can get, before we hit that first game against live competition where it counts, that we can get kind of a whole squad, some action together. I think that's going to bode well for how we get into the season, because it gets real really, really fast. I think we've got 2 games before we travel down to Xavier, and they're picked. It's going to be no walk in the park down there. They're picked to finish second in the Big East, so they return quite a bit. And of course, with Sean Miller down there, I'm sure he would love to get a win against the team that fired his brother. So, we've got to get some cohesion and we've got to be ready quick, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So that's my goal for this week, is to get everybody healthy, to get everybody some action, some live action this week before before these games really start to count.
Yep. Very exciting to see the guys playing. Great that we don't have to wait very long to see them again, and we just get this season rolling. So some great pluses. Obviously, we've got the big guys settled down. Obviously, we want to see, like you said, Trace get in there maybe for at least 3-4 minutes in the beginning, just to get some rhythm with X, see him with Jalen Hood-Schifino and those guys, then sit him down, rest him, don't play him the rest of the game. Interesting to see about Tamar as well. Again, we don't know exactly what his injury is, so if his availability will be out there, but would love to see him get some play. But what I'm going to look for in this next is to see, we talked about the big guys. We saw a lot of good things for the big guys. Now I want those guards. Now I want most of the storylines to be about them, see what they can give us and everything like that. But we don't have to wait long, because St. Francis, that game is on Thursday. It's at 7 p.m. on the Big Ten Plus network again. So we don't have to wait very long until we see that. But that's it for this episode of Hoosier Morning After. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for those tuning in on YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. There you can get notifications about when we're going to go live and see everything like that. Follow me and Martha on Twitter. You'll see lots of announcements about the show there as well. Special thanks, as always, to Bob Thompson. He produced the music you hear on the show. Great musician and everything like that. Thanks for joining in, guys. Go out there, as always, have a wonderful day, and let's go Hoosiers. Thanks.